Hello, history buffs. In today's post, we'll delve into the past to examine three of the biggest blunders that have ever changed the course of human history. These are not just terrible mistakes, they also teach us important lessons that will help us in the present and future. Join me as we examine these crucial moments, identify the circumstances that led to these errors, and talk about the significant impact they had on the world as we know it. Number 1, the sinking of the Titanic. The Titanic was the biggest and most opulent ship ever constructed. In 1912, the ship was supposed to sail from Liverpool, England, to the United States. It was purportedly unsinkable. Everyone is familiar with the infamous tale of the Titanic sinking after colliding with an iceberg. However, the majority of us are unsure of the precise reason why it sank. Miscommunication was a major factor in the Titanic's sinking, but there were several other causes as well. Captain Edward Smith, the Titanic's captain, received several iceberg warnings. However, since none of these cautions mentioned the master's servicegram, they were all disregarded. And because they were not relayed to the captain, the iceberg was not discovered until it was too late. Furthermore, the binoculars were locked, so the Titanic's crew was unable to see the iceberg earlier. The incident was also caused by the ship's construction. By using slag to create the ship's rivets, the Titanic's builders hoped to reduce the cost of building the vessel. Metal can break apart when exposed to slag, a byproduct of the melting process. Some scientists and historians have come to the conclusion that this could be the cause of the Titanic's breakup after hitting the seafloor. Inflation-adjusted financial losses from the Titanic disaster total an eye-watering $168 million, with 1,517 lives lost as a result of the disaster. If there had been enough lifeboats on the Titanic, the passengers might have been saved. The Titanic could only hold about 1,200 people in its lifeboats, out of the 2,200 passengers who were on board. Because people believed the Titanic's claims of being unsinkable, there weren't any lifeboats available. Strangely, Morgan Robertson's book The Titan, which was released in 1898, foreshadowed the Titanic's sinking. Similar to how the Titanic sank after striking an iceberg, the ship The Titan, which is claimed to be an unstoppable vessel in the book, also sinks after doing the same. The Titanic is still present today and continues to serve as a warning to those who try to cut corners as it lays at the bottom of the ocean. Number 2, Napoleon's infamous Russian campaign. A crucial event during the reign of Napoleon that rocked Europe's very foundations. Join me as we explore the dramatic story of Napoleon Bonaparte's bold but ultimately unsuccessful invasion of Russia in 1812. This campaign, also known as the Russian campaign, had far-reaching effects that reverberated across the continent and changed the course of history. We must first set the scene in order to comprehend this historic event. Napoleon, the shrewd military tactician and Emperor of France, had amassed unimaginable power and ruled most of Europe. His ambition knew no bounds as he established the vast French Empire by 1812. However, Russia continued to be a formidable foe and a sign of resistance under the rule of Tsar Alexander I. Napoleon began his bold invasion of Russia in June 1812 with a force known as the Grande Army. The goal of the campaign was to compel Tsar Alexander I to submit to Napoleon's authority. With nearly 500,000 soldiers, the French army moved eastward in what seemed like an unstoppable force. They encountered difficulties they hadn't expected as they traveled further into the vastness of Russia. The Battle of Borodino in September 1812 was one of the campaign's defining moments. This brutal battle, fought outside of Moscow, cost a great deal of lives on both sides. Despite technically coming out on top, the French suffered heavy losses that made it harder for them to keep control of the vast Russian territories. The shocking sight met Napoleon's forces as they entered Moscow. Large portions of the city were destroyed by a devastating fire after the city's inhabitants had largely fled. Instead of the decisive victory Napoleon had hoped for, he discovered himself in a scorched and deserted Moscow. Napoleon was faced with a difficult choice as winter drew near and supplies were running low. Napoleon made the disastrous choice to withdraw from Moscow in October 1812 due to the severe Russian winter, dwindling supplies, and threat of Russian guerrilla warfare. The journey that followed was arduous and deadly, accompanied by disease, sub-freezing temperatures, and relentless harassment from Russian forces. During this retreat, the once powerful Grande Army suffered devastating losses. The Russian campaign of Napoleon marked a turning point in the history of Europe. Napoleon's power significantly declined as a result of the disastrous retreat and the loss of a large portion of his army. It gave the peoples of Europe more confidence, which sparked the formation of a coalition against France and ultimately resulted in Napoleon's defeat and exile to Elba in 1814. The 1812 invasion of Russia serves as a sobering example of the dangers of overreach as well as the effects of geography, climate, and the tenacity of a resisting population. The effects of the campaign were felt for years, influencing both Napoleon's fate and the course of Europe. Share your opinions and favorite historical moments in the comments section below about this remarkable historical chapter. Number 3. Alexander the Great dying without an heir. For centuries, historians and academics have been perplexed by the apparent lack of a successor to the legendary conquistador Alexander the Great. The great empire was left without a direct successor due to a complex web of rivalries, politics, and events, which ultimately changed the course of history in unexpected ways. Let's establish the situation before we explore the heirless conundrum. The young Macedonian king Alexander began a campaign of conquest that would alter the course of history. He built one of the most important empires in history, from his amazing victories in Persia to the vast territories he conquered across Asia. The sudden and untimely death of Alexander in 323 BC marked the beginning of the complicated situation that followed. Nevertheless, despite his military prowess, he faced an unforeseen challenge: the absence of a clear heir to his throne. His mysterious death at the young age of 32 shocked and unnerved his empire, which he left in ruins. The lack of a designated successor allowed his generals and allies to become embroiled in intrigue, power struggles, and ambitions. The period after Alexander's death, known as the Wars of the Diadochi, was a turbulent time of war as his former generals, the Diadochi, fought for dominance over various parts of the empire. Once united under Alexander, the empire quickly broke up into several Hellenistic kingdoms, each ruled by a successor seeking to consolidate their power. The unstable dynastic line was one of the difficulties that contributed to the heirless circumstance. Alexander did have a son named Alexander IV, but he was still a baby at the time of his father's passing. As a result of his vulnerability in the Diadochi's power struggles, he met a tragic end. The establishment of the Ptolemaic kingdom in Egypt, which was led by Ptolemy, one of Alexander's most dependable generals, is among this era's most enduring legacies. Although the Ptolemaic dynasty would go on to produce a number of notable monarchs, including the well-known Cleopatra, the dynasty's eventual demise made the issue of Alexander's heir even more difficult. The effects of Alexander's heirless death were felt far and wide. The Hellenistic kingdoms that developed following the Wars of the Diadochi had a major impact on the social, political, and cultural makeup of the ancient Mediterranean region. They also prepared the ground for Rome's emergence as a superpower in the centuries that followed. The lack of a clear heir to Alexander the Great's empire has been a historical puzzle throughout history, affecting the development of empires and civilization. Share your opinions, favorite historical mysteries, or any other topics you'd like us to cover in the comments section below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more enthralling journeys through history.